You are driving home from a late dinner with your family. It is just past 8 o'clock in the evening, but it is already pitch dark outside. You are gripping the steering wheel of your car significantly tighter than you normally do. Your shoulders are tense, your jaws clenched. Every time a car approaches from the opposite direction, the glare of their headlights hits your windshield and seems to explode into a massive, blinding star burst. For a terrifying 3 seconds, you cannot see the lines on the road. You cannot see the shoulder. You are navigating entirely by memory and prayer. You slow down to 10 miles under the speed limit, ignoring the cars lining up impatiently behind you, completely focused on just getting your vehicle safely into your own driveway. When you finally pull into your garage and turn off the engine, you let out a long breath. You sit in the quiet darkness for a moment, and you feel a deep, heavy knot forming in your stomach. It is the realization that your world is physically shrinking. The next morning, you wake up, and before you even throw the covers back, you feel the discomfort. Your eyes feel dry, sticky, and heavy. It feels as though someone slipped into your room while you were sleeping and threw a handful of fine grit sand under your eyelids. You blink, trying to clear the feeling, but the bedroom is out of focus. The numbers on the alarm clock are fuzzy. The edges of the dresser across the room are blurred. It takes a full hour of blinking, splashing water on your face, and drinking your morning coffee before your vision finally sharpens enough to read the newspaper. You rub your temples, you sigh, and you tell yourself that this is just the reality of having older eyes. You tell yourself that the machinery is simply wearing out, that blurry vision and dry eyes are just another unavoidable tax you have to pay for living past a certain age. You assume the only options left are buying thicker glasses every year or eventually submitting to an expensive invasive surgery. I used to tell myself that exact same story. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 81 years old. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, a place where the sun is incredibly bright and the air is bone dry. It is a harsh environment for human eyes. But the real danger to our vision is not the Arizona sun, and it is not simply the turning of the calendar pages. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a working-class neighborhood where men like my father worked in manufacturing plants until their bodies simply gave out. My father never complained about his vision, but in his final years I noticed he stopped reading the evening paper. He stopped driving after 4 in the afternoon. He just quietly surrendered the things he enjoyed because he could no longer see them clearly, and he believed there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. I spent most of my adult life working in community health education. My job was to take complicated medical concepts and translate them into plain, practical language that ordinary people could use to protect their own health. I used metaphors from construction sites, from auto mechanic shops, and from household plumbing to explain how the human body worked. I prided myself on understanding how to maintain the physical engine, and yet when my own vision started to fail me, I fell into the exact same trap of quiet resignation that my father did. After my wife Margaret passed away in 2019, I was living alone. When Margaret was alive, she handled the night driving in our later years. She had sharp eyes, and she did not mind the glare. After she was gone, the responsibility fell entirely back on me. That is when I noticed how bad things had gotten. I found myself making excuses to avoid leaving the house after sunset. I found myself holding the mail at arm's length just to read the return address. The morning blurriness was taking longer and longer to clear. I was terrified of the day the state of Arizona would ask me to read the chart at the motor vehicle department to renew my license. In this part of the country, if you lose your car keys, you lose your independence entirely. I did what most people do. I went to the local pharmacy, walked down the aisle with 50 different kinds of eye drops, and bought the most expensive box I could find. I put the drops in my eyes every morning and every night. It felt good for about 10 minutes. It was exactly like spraying a mist of water onto a dried-out sponge sitting in the desert. It softens the surface for a brief moment, but the sponge is still sitting in the baking sun. The drops were doing absolutely nothing to stop the actual progressive decay of the cells in the back of my eye. They were just masking the symptom. They were like putting a fresh coat of expensive paint over a rotting wooden foundation. My daughter Laura is a registered nurse up in Phoenix, and she has spent decades observing the realities of the aging human body. She came down to visit me one Sunday afternoon. She watched me squinting violently at the thermostat on the hallway wall, trying to figure out if it was set to 72 or 78. She watched me rub my eyes constantly. She sat me down at my own kitchen table and told me we needed to talk about what was actually happening inside my head. Laura got my son Daniel on speakerphone. Daniel is a physical therapist in Denver, and he understands the systemic mechanical connections in the body better than anyone I know. Between the two of them, they explain the physiological reality of aging eyes to me in a way that no optometrist ever had during a hurried 7-minute vision exam. They explained that I was not just suffering from old age. I was suffering from cellular starvation and severe oxidative damage. Daniel explained that the retina, the delicate light-sensitive tissue lining the very back of the inside of your eye, is one of the most complex structures in the human body. It requires a massive, constant supply of oxygen and specific nutrients to function. All day long, your eyes are bombarded by ultraviolet light from the sun, blue light from television screens, and environmental stress. This light exposure creates microscopic damage. It creates free radicals that burn through the delicate photoreceptor cells that allow you to see sharp details. When you go to sleep at night, your body is supposed to send a repair crew into the eyes to fix that daily damage. The night shift clocks in to rebuild the tissue, clear out the dead cells, and restore the fluids. But as we get older, our circulation slows down. The tiny microscopic blood vessels that feed the retina become stiff and narrow. The repair crew shows up to the factory for the night shift, but the supply trucks never arrive. The mechanics are standing there with no tools and no raw materials. So, the damage from yesterday does not get fixed. It just rolls over into tomorrow. And over months and years, that compounding unfixed damage is what causes the morning blurriness, the severe dry eyes, and the terrifying glare of headlights. But it gets worse. Daniel explained a second process that was actively destroying my vision, and it completely changed how I look at the food I eat. He called it sugar rust. In the medical world, it is called glycation. Daniel told me to imagine taking a raw egg and dropping it onto the hot concrete of a sidewalk in the middle of July. The clear, runny egg white immediately cooks. It turns hard, sticky, and opaque. He told me that is essentially what decades of eating the standard American diet, full of processed carbohydrates and slightly elevated blood sugar, does to the proteins inside your eye. The excess glucose in your blood literally cooks the proteins in your lens and your retina. It creates a sticky, toxic sludge that clouds your vision. It is the foundational cause of cataracts and macular deterioration. It is exactly like having a thick layer of permanent grease on the inside of your car's windshield. You can run the wipers on the outside all day long. You can use all the expensive eye drops you want, but it will never clear the view because the damage is baked into the glass itself. I asked them what I was supposed to do about it. If the damage was happening inside the tissue and the blood vessels were narrowing, how could I possibly fix it without surgery? Laura explained that I could not fix it with an artificial drop. I had to feed the repair crew. I had to intentionally put the exact specific raw materials the eye needed into my bloodstream right before I went to sleep, so that when the night shift clocked in, the tools were sitting right there on the workbench. She told me I needed a biological solvent to clean the inside of the windshield. Laura went to the grocery store and brought back a piece of fruit I had almost never eaten in my entire life. It was a papaya. Growing up in Ohio, we ate apples, we ate pears, we ate peaches in the summer. Papaya was an exotic thing you saw in pictures of Hawaii. I was a meat and potatoes man, and I looked at this bright orange fruit with deep skepticism. But Laura explained the mechanics of it. She told me that papaya contains a very specific, naturally occurring enzyme called papain. This enzyme is essentially a biological solvent. When it enters your digestive system and makes its way into your bloodstream, it goes to work breaking down damaged, misfolded proteins. It directly attacks the sticky sugar rust, the glycation, that is clouding the lens and degrading the delicate tissue of the macula. It acts like a highly specialized cleaning crew, dissolving the cooked proteins that are causing the cloudy, blurry vision. To make the repair kit complete, she pulled a bag of tiny, dark berries out of the freezer. They were wild blueberries. Not the giant, shiny, cultivated blueberries sitting in the plastic clamshells in the produce aisle. Those are bred for size and sugar, but they lack the heavy armor. Wild blueberries are small, dense, and incredibly dark. Laura explained that the deep purple pigment in the skin of a wild blueberry contains a compound that can actually cross the barrier from the bloodstream directly into the retinal tissue. Once inside the eye, these compounds act like internal sunglasses. They absorb the leftover oxidative damage. They calm the microscopic fires burning in the tissue, and they protect the cells that allow you to adjust from bright light to darkness. I was willing to try it. I was willing to try anything to avoid losing my ability to drive at night. But Daniel stopped me and gave me a very strict set of rules. He told me that identifying the right food is only 10% of the solution. The other 90% is how you consume it. He explained that most people eat these fruits in a way that completely destroys their medical value before they even reach the stomach. He gave me 5 absolute rules for my nightly routine, and he told me that if I broke them, I was just eating dessert, not repairing my eyes. The first rule was timing. I had to eat this specific combination of fruit exactly 60 to 90 minutes before I went to sleep. If I ate it too early in the afternoon, my body would process the nutrients and flush them out before the nighttime repair cycle ever began. If I ate it right as my head hit the pillow, my body would be forcing blood to my stomach for heavy digestion instead of sending it up to my eyes for repair. Hitting that specific window meant the biological solvent and the antioxidants were peaking in my bloodstream exactly when the eye's maintenance crew was clocking in. The second rule was temperature. This is where almost everyone makes a mistake. People keep papaya in the refrigerator because it tastes refreshing when it is cold. But Daniel explained that cold temperatures severely suppress enzyme activity. If you eat cold papaya, the papain enzyme is sluggish and inactive. It is exactly like trying to pour thick, freezing cold oil into a combustion engine. It does not flow and it does not clean. I had to take the papaya out of the refrigerator a full hour before I ate it, allowing it to come completely to room temperature so the enzyme was operating at maximum strength when it entered my body. The third rule was the hardest for me to accept because it violated a habit I had held for 50 years. No dairy? I used to love eating fruit with a scoop of cottage cheese or a splash of milk. It seemed like the healthiest possible evening snack. Daniel told me I had to stop that immediately. The calcium and the specific proteins found in dairy act like a solid brick wall in your digestive tract when they encounter the antioxidants in blueberries and papaya. The milk proteins physically bind to the deep purple pigments and the enzymes, neutralizing them instantly. Your body cannot absorb them. They pass right through you. Eating a bowl of blueberries with milk means you are actively blocking the exact nutrients your eyes are starving for. The fourth rule was about transportation. The nutrients that protect the macula and clear the lens are entirely fat-soluble. That means they require dietary fat to carry them through the intestinal wall and into the blood. If you eat a bowl of plain fruit with 0 fat, your body leaves a massive percentage of the medicine behind. You have to provide a carrier vehicle. Daniel told me to add a small handful of crushed walnuts to the bowl every single night. The natural, healthy fat in the walnuts acts as the transport truck, picking up the enzymes and the antioxidants and driving them directly into the bloodstream where the eyes can finally access them. The fifth rule was simply about how I washed the berries. I used to dump fruit into a colander and scrub it aggressively under a hard stream of running water. Laura told me that the most powerful protective compounds in a wild blueberry are concentrated right on the very surface of the fragile skin. Scrubbing them violently under the faucet literally washes the medicine down the kitchen sink. You have to treat them delicately. A gentle rinse right before eating. I adopted this routine with the discipline of a man whose freedom was on the line. Every evening at exactly 8 o'clock, I would take a portion of papaya out of the refrigerator and set it on the counter to warm up. At 9 o'clock, I would cut 1 cup of room temperature papaya cubes into a bowl. I would add 1/3 of a cup of thawed wild blueberries. I would squeeze a little fresh lime juice over the top because Laura explained that the vitamin C in the lime dramatically boosts the body's ability to absorb the vitamin A in the papaya. And finally, I would sprinkle a small handful of crushed walnuts over the fruit. I would sit on my back porch in the cool evening air, and I would eat it slowly. No dairy, no cold temperatures. Just the raw materials my body desperately needed. It was not an overnight miracle. You do not reverse decades of cellular damage and sugar rust in a long weekend. For the first few weeks, I did not notice a dramatic difference, but I trusted the mechanics of the process, and I stayed the course. Around the second month, I woke up one morning and realized something was missing. I did not feel the grit in my eyes. The sensation of crushed sand under my eyelids was completely gone. I opened my eyes, and I did not have to spend an hour blinking to bring the bedroom dresser into focus. The edges of the furniture were sharp immediately. My tear ducts were producing fluid again, naturally lubricating the surface of the eye because the microscopic inflammation had been put out. By the third month, the real test came. I drove to my son's house for dinner, and I had to drive back to Scottsdale after dark. I merged onto the highway, gripping the steering wheel, bracing myself for the blinding starbursts of the oncoming traffic. A large truck approached in the opposite lane. The headlights were bright, yes, but they were just headlights. They did not explode across my windshield. They did not blind me. The deep purple pigments from the wild blueberries and the biological solvent from the papaya had cleared the internal grease from my lenses and rebuilt the protective filter in my retina. I could see the lines on the road clearly. I drove the speed limit all the way home, with my shoulders relaxed and my breathing steady. Later that year, I walked into the motor vehicle department to renew my license. I stood behind the yellow line, looked into the machine, and read the letters on the bottom row with a calm, quiet confidence. I walked out of that building with my keys in my pocket and my independence completely intact. After 60, it is incredibly easy to accept a terrible narrative. We are conditioned by a hurried medical system to believe that the slow loss of our physical independence is just a non-negotiable term of aging. We are taught to manage the decline with expensive drops and thicker lenses rather than investigating the mechanical cause of the failure. We assume that because our vision is fading, our machinery is simply broken beyond repair. But your body is an astonishingly resilient instrument. Even when the blood vessels are narrowing and the lenses are cloudy with rust, the body is desperate to repair the damage. It just cannot do the heavy lifting if you send the maintenance crew to the factory floor with empty hands. You do not have to accept the morning blurriness. You do not have to resign yourself to the terror of night driving. You do not have to hand over your car keys just because the calendar says you are old. You simply have to understand how to feed the machine. You have to understand that a cold piece of fruit eaten with a glass of milk is biologically useless, but a room temperature bowl of enzyme-rich papaya and wild blueberries, carried by healthy fats right before the night shift begins, is a powerful structural repair kit. Independence is not lost all at once in a grand, dramatic moment. It is lost in inches. It is lost the day you stop reading your favorite book because the print is too fuzzy. It is lost the evening you decline an invitation to dinner because you are too afraid to navigate the roads in the dark. It is lost when you stop looking at the fine details of your grandchildren's faces because you cannot focus on them anymore. Fight for those inches. Give your internal wiring and your delicate optical tissue the precise materials they actually need to rebuild the damage. The changes in your vision might seem permanent, but they're often just a loud, desperate signal that your body is begging for the right tools. Answer the call. Put the tools on the workbench. I am Harold Bennett. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.